So here's the E34 M5 LE looking completely stripped and sorry for itself almost, with nothing on the front. So no front panel, no kidney grille section, no bonnet, no engine obviously, no engine, no gearbox. It's all completely, you know, we've gone absolutely to the next level really. This restoration is turning into a very, very good, large, highly detailed one, because interestingly it's surprising how much surface corrosion is present in the engine bay. And naturally, if we are doing a full restoration, we do want to rid the chassis and all metal areas and all brackets and all parts that could suffer with corrosion. We want to rid that of it. So that's what's happened. The engine has come out along with the gearbox onto a frame, and now we have good access to the chassis legs. This was the original area that we were concerned about, where we were going to be able to do our finished paint from underneath the car, where we were going to be able to stop, where we were going to be able to get to, and also we could see corrosion on certain brackets like earth strap brackets here. And also I remember looking up in the video last time, looking at this ABS pump bracket, which is spot welded and MIG welded onto the bottom of the chassis leg on the left hand side, and looking at the corrosion trapped in between the panel layers, and knowing full well that the car going to body shop paint, although it would have an engine bay repaint, which is arguably not much because there isn't a huge amount of visible in this engine bay, but I'm pretty sure that unless it was a restoration body shop, I'm pretty sure that most body shops, probably 95% in the country, and this is nothing to do with bad mouthing any body shop, they wouldn't be interested in taking brackets off and getting corrosion out from that joint in there to be able to paint the car, and they certainly wouldn't be doing it with the engine in place. So first step was to get the engine out, and then it was for us to decide whether it was going to be a body shop area to do the engine bay, or whether it was going to be a Redish Motorsport area. And I mean, this is perfectly right up our street, because that's what we deal with constantly. We are removing, treating, stopping and slowing down corrosion, and then carrying out various different processes to make sure that it doesn't come back again. And we've got our work cut out. It may not look bad, and it doesn't look like there's loads of holes everywhere, but everywhere where you look there is surface corrosion on brackets for the headlight area, bonnet stay brackets. Look at that corrosion building up behind there. I mean, that might not be too long, that might be just a couple of years until that turns into a hole possibly. Various corrosion here where the washer bottle's been rubbing up on the various points up here, bracket sections here where they're MIG welded on. You know, nobody's really going to be able to guarantee that if they paint that engine bay that they can stop that rust coming in. So I mean, we're going to need to do it, and we're going to do it absolutely properly, and we're going to do it by documenting it as well, exactly like what we've been doing for the underside of the car. So we're just going to roll this video into, because it's effectively a continuation, because we haven't finished the underside yet, so we're going to do an entire paint system all in one go. And it's more than likely that our textured paint finish will come up to the chassis legs on the vertical section, and then anything from horizontal upwards will technically class as engine bay, which will probably get final finished paint from a proper body shop. But we've got surface corrosion here on the chassis legs where the bumper irons or the bumper shock absorbers go, and this is quite rough. This isn't just surface corrosion, this is actually quite a thickness build up of corrosion. Various studs which have got corrosion which might need to be removed and put plug weld, riv studs in that location possibly. And we've already started pricing up the brackets, and the fantastic thing with BMW, they used to call it mobile tradition, is that they give you a great access to the parts, genuine BMW parts, and the most obscure parts that are still available. I mean, this is a 24-year-old car because it was produced in '95, but technically the chassis which came out, the E34 came out in '88, so it's a 32-year-old car. And these brackets are still available, and they're really not much money. Like this bracket here, this complex pressing ABS pump bracket is it was something like £7. I mean, we'd be mad not to buy that and take that one off, throw it in the bin, or you know, save it for somebody else. But then we can get rid of all this corrosion which is building up underneath there and install a new one. The headlight brackets were a little bit more money. These ones over here, I think these were £22, but the bonnet stay brackets were only £11. Simply held in with two spot welds there. We can get that off. We'll know exactly where to plug weld it into the position at the same time, and we can get rid of that corrosion at the same time, which isn't on the other side. but yeah, it is on this side. So we've got no way of getting to this, and this is something that everybody should consider. The level of detail when you are considering a restoration or even an engine bay refresh. How detailed are you going? You may not want to do all this down here because the engine would be in the way and you wouldn't want to take the engine out, but bear in mind that on older cars you've got so much open to the elements, and rust and corrosion will build up anywhere it can, especially on panel edges. As I was saying, yeah, the corrosion level will get anywhere on the bottom of these wing flitches up here, and now we've got perfect access, we can get to it all. So that's what we're going to be doing. We've already started on corrosion removal and surface preparations. As you can see down the chassis legs, the internal sections, now the engine's out, we've got bare metal in areas, and you can still see some of the original Orinoco green paint, which we don't necessarily need to take off, but areas that we're happy with that have been prepared and would be ready for the next stage, which would be a Pour 15 metal prep. But we won't do that now because we're still working on other corroded areas. Now we've got the sun out, you can really see what I was just talking about, the corrosion level on this chassis leg. And it's not really just surface corrosion, it's actually really high spots, peaks and troughs on there. For some reason that's been growing, which isn't nice. So another area that we're going to be doing is these corner pieces. These are sort of reinforcement sort of plates which have just got 90-degree folded areas. We've had to work underneath them already because this one was actually particularly corroded, but we've worked that one, and then this one we noticed there was corrosion in the corner, which is quite deep. It's not actually touching, there's a sort of a water trail gap down the back, but it is an area which is a bit tricky to get to, and also with the edges of corrosion there, and also up in that little section up there, we do worry that whether it's in the seam section, like between the two metal layers. So we found them on BMW parts catalogue, and these were something less than £10 each, which was amazing. So we're definitely going to be getting some of those, and we're going to aim to take those ones out as long as they're still available, which we were told they were. So as long as they're on the shelf when the nice German man goes to pick them for us, they'll probably be glad to get rid of them because they've probably been on the shelf since 1988. But yeah, we're going to be replacing them. This side's obviously got a hole in it because it's got the air conditioning dryer which sits in that location there. That side is perforated but not punched out. Not quite sure why an aircon dryer would be on that side. Maybe they couldn't decide, or maybe they just wanted to symmetricalize, is that the word? Don't think that's a word, but you know what I mean. Maybe make them exactly the same, but I thought that all the aircon dryers on E34s were on that side. But tell you what, if you know any different, let us know in the comments. Were aircon dryers ever fitted on the left hand side in that perforated hole due to different engine variants and things like that? So they're going to be changed. Various other brackets we're going to change as much as we can. You know, these are human applied plug welds there and there. These aren't robotic spot welds. It is famed as the last true hand-built car, which, you know, that sort of can be seen in areas. Various amounts of things are spot welded together by robots or even handheld spot weld machines, but certain things are, being at an M5 and a last incarnation of the E34, there are add-ons and things for a 3.8 that they had to do, which may not have been planned for back in production times of the 80s when they were planning this chassis. So there are hand-built areas that are plug welds. So simply what I'm saying is we can remove those, take that bracket off, deal with any corrosion that might be trapped underneath the bracket, maybe apply a new bracket, and we'll get it back into the exact same position, and we will obviously plug weld it into the same level as well. And there's other areas that are MIG weld or stitch weld with a MIG welder, one there and one there, because there's just no flange needed to put a spot weld location in there. So there's areas that we will be replicating as best as possible, and there's areas that we will be leaving. For example, seam sealer, original looking seam sealer, which has no issue with it, from this bit here running down the wing flitch to finish there, there's no issue with that, and there's absolutely no corrosion in there or underneath it. We've looked from the other side as well, so that we'll be trying to keep that, because that sort of thing is going to be very hard to replicate. We have got a Kent OEM engine bay seam sealer replication system, but it does it for new vehicles from sort of like E90 onwards, which have got the little spirals around the side of it. But these are original factory seam seals, and we want to try and keep those as best as possible. If there is corrosion coming out of a corner or anywhere down some of those, we will have to remove them, but hopefully not. We're also going to be taking good pictures and measurements of all the stickers on the car. I know this one's upside down now, but there you go, it confirms it's an Orinoco metallic vehicles, so that was one of the 50 LE 3.8s, and obviously if you know your numbers on the LEs, it was one of 35, so there's 35 Orinoco's and 15 Rosso Reds. So other areas, not too much corrosion to deal with at the back on the bulkhead area. That has a big matting all the way around it, and we've really left the matting on for the last minute because we weren't quite sure whether the matting was going to be able to survive or even stay in position whilst we do that. But obviously it was silly to leave it in position because we need to access the bulkhead and see if there's any corrosion. The bad news is the matting is quite damaged, as they all are. They're very brittle and they do snap and break very easy, and also it's no longer available. So we're trying to see if we can salvage it and put it back in position. If not, we will have to look at another model to see if we can get one in there which is a similar shape, maybe an E32 7 Series. We may even look for an E39. We know it's not going to fit perfectly, but we're going to get something in there if we can't salvage the original one up there. Under here you can see where the engine bay wasn't quite painted fully, and quite rightly in a way, you know, it wasn't needed to be painted fully, but look how bright the green is up there because it hasn't got many layers on it. On the original primer it's probably only got one or maybe even two small little sort of passes over it, which is why it's a lot brighter in that area rather than the darker traditional Orinoco green, which obviously in the engine bay got multiple passes to make it original. We have decided this is cavity wax. You can see there's a lot of cavity wax here. Why it was all sort of spread about in that such a strange area with no real not really doing anything, is it? It would have been a lot better actually in a cavity or in a hidden section, but it's just sort of like they saw the washer bottle area up there and they thought, oh yeah, just put some cavity wax under there, that'll really help it, and then just like wasted itself down the inner section of that. So that's going to have to come off as well. Original seam sealer here, this is a little bit more of the sort of seam sealer that we can reproduce with that special gun, but it's still quite this car is obviously an older car, so our seam sealer replications are from like E90 and E80 onwards, and whereas this is a little bit more rippled because it's obviously a slightly outdated vehicle for the corrosion, the seam sealer application gun. So there's that corrosion I was talking about there. Various corrosion growing on a grommet here. That looks like a metal grommet because it's got corrosion actually on it, but nasty to see, and you don't want to keep that. Look at that, another one there, which will be on the top and also underneath on the bottom. Now I should briefly just talk about these brackets as well. These are the brackets for the condenser from memory. They came off somewhere about there, I think. This might be the other side, but that is condenser brackets. They were £4 each, so there's absolutely no point putting old ones back on. So we'll be definitely taking the opportunity to put brand new BMW condenser brackets still on. So we've got those on order. Then we've got another set of brackets. Now we've gone a little bit more adventurous in this area and taken out the brackets which hold the bumper irons. So I call bumper irons shock absorbers, but there's a big shock absorber that sits here to hold the bumper carrier and one that sits on top of the chassis leg, and they go through some holes here and here into a threaded plate which actually lives up here in the chassis leg. Now the sun's come out and made it all bright, so it might not be able to picture very well, but I've got the bolts back in there. But technically this bracket sits on the underside of that chassis leg, and it's just held in with 4 spot welds, 1, 2, 3, 4, and all it's there for is just to give yourself some threads to then screw the bolts through the bumper shocks into the chassis leg. So it's basically just making a nut location, and we could see the corroded areas around the top. I didn't bring a torch, but you can make that out definitely. Look at the corrosion that's trapped in there, and this is really anal stuff now because we're inside the chassis leg, which is arguably very hard to get to, quite thick metal, so it's probably never going to hole itself, but we need to take care of that corrosion. I couldn't really live with myself and call this a proper Redish Motorsport restoration if we were seeing corrosion underneath brackets and left it there. So that's what we're doing. Here's one of the brackets there, so that is the side that was trapped touching the metal, because you can see the spot welds that we've drilled out, and that would have been touching the bottom of the chassis leg. So top was okay on this side, but the bottom definitely not. So we're taking care of that as well. It's going to be tricky to get in there because it's deep, and that's the front one. I mean, there's one further at the back as well, which we need to get to, but that's exactly what we're going to do, and that's the level of detail that we're going to.